Well, folks, in today's video, we're going to be working on a Project Delco FA1 diesel. I found this on eBay about a month ago, and it kind of caught my eye because it appeared to be heavily customized. I always like those sorts of project locomotives because you really don't know what you're getting yourself into, and they're often full of surprises. And I don't think this one will be an exception. It looks like somebody gave it an unusual weathering job and added a whole bunch of different details. And honestly, it doesn't look fantastic. It apparently doesn't run, so not many people showed up to the auction, which was kind of a benefit. I won it for $10. So anyways, we'll dig this thing out of the box, we'll see what exactly its working or non-working order is like, and then we'll try to make any necessary repairs on this highly unusual diesel. So here it is. As you can see, it looks pretty rough. Somebody's definitely gone at it with a paintbrush, and they've added details like this yard light. I believe that this locomotive was made by RSO, although the trucks on here look like they're off a Bachmann locomotive. We do have knuckle couplers, which is nice to see. But as for the operating condition, I really don't know what to expect. So let's take it over to the track. I don't know about all of you, but I always find it kind of exciting putting stuff like this on the track because you just never know what it's going to do. Anyways, we'll crank up the voltage here and see if anything happens. I'm not seeing any movement, but I do hear something. Oh! Huh, that's really strange. It's getting power just fine, but it seems to have a little bit of a traction issue. Huh. It's kind of funny too, because it doesn't look like it's meant to have traction tires, so I don't know if maybe we've got a broken gear inside here. If it's got the pancake drive, often the gears crack and sometimes they split, so maybe only one wheel is getting power, and that might explain why it's moving, but not very well. So clearly it's in need of some repairs. I'm not entirely surprised, but it is actually in better working order than I would have expected. The seller claimed that this thing didn't run whatsoever, so a bit of movement on the track is not a bad sign. And if it has bad gears, I probably have some replacements laying around, so I think that we will be able to get this thing going again. Anyways, let's remove the shell here. Look at that, somebody has gone and put two motors inside this thing. That's interesting. So it's a couple Bachmann pancake drives. These are not very good drive systems, but that might explain our traction issue because we've got wires going absolutely everywhere, and maybe one of the motors isn't getting power, and that's why it was kind of dragging along. The weight is just completely loose inside here as well. I could feel it rattling around while I was putting the engine on the track. Looks like somebody tried to glue it down with some adhesive, but that clearly failed long ago. I also just can't explain how bad this thing smells. It's like it was roommates with the Marlboro Man. It's definitely been to flavor country 1,000 or so times. And this wiring is just a mess. So I think we'll remove both the power trucks here and see if we can get the second motor going again. And hopefully this thing will be a decent runner. If we can get both of them running properly, we'll actually have decent pulling capacity because it's basically got the power of two mid-80s locomotives. I'd always love to know the stories behind these sorts of project locomotives. Like, if somebody wanted to get good pulling capacity, I don't know why you wouldn't just buy yourself an Athearn drive. Maybe they wanted to just build something on a budget. Who really knows? Doesn't seem so bad. All the gears seem to be intact. Well, we appear to only have one split gear, which is pretty remarkable actually. These are usually the first part to go. Now, as for the motors themselves, we'll have to slowly dig down to that. Remove these plates. You have to be careful because these are spring loaded. Yeah, this thing definitely had a fair amount of hours put on it. Just look at the wear on that commutator. The inside, though, is far from the worst I've ever seen. I've opened some of these pancake drives up, and they're just caked with old grease and full of dust and hair and all sorts of other nastiness. So this really is not that bad. A bit of cleaning, and I'm sure that will look like new. Well, that came out looking half decent. As for the coils, these two are looking pretty good, but this one over here is missing some of its wax, so maybe it's shorted. It was running pretty well, though. Well, it seems to have good continuity, so I guess we'll throw it back in there. So given that this drive is fairly clean, I think I'm just going to go through it with a bit of rubbing alcohol. If it was severely greased up, I'd probably recommend soaking it in some warm soapy water. This should get the job done. You can use Q-tips, but always be careful not to get the fibers caught on anything because they will mess up a drive real quick. So we're going to slowly start reassembling this locomotive, and you can put a fair amount of oil on all the gears, etc., and that's okay. But one thing I would suggest is be very sparing for how much you put on this bearing beside these two holes, because that rests right beside where the commutator is. And what will happen is if you put too much, it will leak down here, and then as the motor spins, it will actually get spat out onto the commutator and burn. And this is really bad because that conductive lubricant will get caught in the little gaps, and it will collect carbon, and it will destroy your commutator. So try to avoid that. Lubricate this thing like your Scrooge McDuck. Basically just getting like a bit of residue on there, and that's all you need. And as for the rest of it, you can put a drop and it will be just fine. There we go. I don't know why it was stuck like that for a second. Maybe one of the brushes hadn't quite seated properly, but it's kind of concerning when you take something apart that was in working order and it doesn't want to fire up. I mean, we're still going to have to fix this mess of wiring, but I think for now we can move on to the second truck. I'll try putting some power to it before we even crack this thing open, because we don't actually know if this one has a working motor. Well, apparently it does, and it actually sounds half decent. Well, the brushes are stuck. That's not a great sign. Just as before, this gearbox really doesn't look all that bad. So for the wiring, I'm going to try to match this up as best I can right here. We can see on this side we got a red wire. Trying to match that, and that red wire heads to this side, just as it does on this truck. And we just have to wire the two together, but we'll do that once we get it inside the locomotive. But this is important, because if you cross the wires from truck to truck, it will cause a short circuit. Or the other thing that could happen is if you don't wire this up to the correct brushes, the two motors will actually work against each other. So that wouldn't be so ideal. Just gonna quickly take this thing over the track and make sure I haven't made any mistakes. Okay, we want to see no short circuits. Alright. Well, that's about good enough for me. Just waiting for the universal weight mount to heat up, but while it has been, I've been kind of observing this locomotive, and I noticed something, which is that there is a piece of plastic here on both sides, and that's because I think somebody actually combined two separate locomotives, not just with the motors, but with the chassis as well, because you can see it was split right down the middle, so they wanted to make this a little bit longer. It's kind of ratchet, but it does work, and it looks like they reinforced it with some building supplies down there on the bottom. I also just find it hilarious that somebody threw a metal knuckle coupler on the back of this thing. I mean, you know, it's a pretty cheap engine, but they wanted to put some quality somewhere in it. This thing is just clearly nicer than anything I've ever worked on before. Alright, I think this thing is ready to hit the rails. Yeah, look at that. Fantastic. Let's see if it can pull some cars now with that dual motor setup. Oh man, this thing even does stunts. What the heck? Whoa. Well, I'm guessing that was just the insulation burning off the wires. I don't know. As per most locomotives with a 3-pole motor, this thing has a really good top end speed, but what I'm curious to see is what the low end is like. So I'm just gonna slowly step down the voltage here. We'll see where it kicks out. Yeah, it definitely kicks out pretty early, but it's not stalling, so for what it is, it's actually decent performance. Well folks, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. I really enjoyed working on this thing. It was a little bit of an oddball locomotive, but I always like working on this kind of stuff. It's always fun to open these things up and see what exactly you find. And this one certainly did not disappoint in that regard, and I think it actually turned out to be a half-decent runner for what it is. So I'll finish it off there. Thank you all so much for watching.